Hi, my name is Sasha Eder. Two disclaimers up front. Unfortunately, this video closely follows the release of the video game Cyberpunk 2077, which in its topics will be somewhat related to the topics which I'm about to talk about. But be assured that it has actually nothing to do with this video. Another is that from what you are about to hear, it is likely, and understandably so, that you may think that I am psychotic. But be assured that I am not, mainly because it is impossible for me to be psychotic and not to suffer from any cognitive or negative symptoms at the same time. Though you can make the case that I am simply delusional, in which case you wouldn't be able to explain the things which you'd write off as hallucinations. Since the end of last year, I have been the subject of a CIA and DoD brainwashing operation. This is a brief summary. About 15 months ago, supposedly the CIA has recruited me as apparently one of their agents. I say supposedly as it is not obvious, as even though they have suggested to me several times that the CIA is responsible for this, it is actually not certain whether it is the CIA or several departments within the DoD who is responsible for this. Personally, I assume that it is a joint operation between both, or that they are cooperating in this regard, which seems even almost inevitable to me. It also seems to require the cooperation of the BKA, at least to some extent. I say as apparently one of their agents, as even though they have suggested to me several times that even though they have expressed their desire for me to identify myself with being a CIA agent or officer, as I have learned by now several times, it was actually not obvious to me that I may rightly identify myself as such, not having received any contract or payment or the same kind of training as they have. It was more of a game, and they seem to require me to adopt the group identity in order to adopt new values and groupthink. Though, by the way, it could actually be that nowadays, aside from how they recruit people at campuses and so on and so forth, if they recruit people outside, that they may recruit people just in the same manner as they have recruited me. The first few months were an exciting time. Several things have happened which no sane person would usually ever believe you. On one hand, I was threatened with and scared to death. And on the other hand, it was adventurous. They seemed extremely competent in what they did, and there were relationships of mutual love, I'd say. Unfortunately, a few things went wrong, and I made some big mistakes, though they also happened due to the complete uncertainty I was put in, imprecise communication, and some crucial pretense and deceit on their part. If I were told once that I shouldn't have done these things, then I wouldn't have done these things. There were a few positive changes as a consequence of their recruitment, primarily through my desire to adopt more responsibility. I started to continuously keep my room in order. I started to separate my garbage. I started to adopt a regular sleeping rhythm. To appeal to them, I stopped watching porn, almost entirely stopped playing video games and commenting in social networks. I did switch to e-cigarettes and drastically reduced my cannabis consumption. And I know, again, you may think that I suffer from a drug-induced psychosis, for example, but I haven't taken any drugs all year long, except for marijuana once, I think, in January. So that is also out of the question. I postponed my dream of starting a streaming career. I tried my best to perform in the challenges that they set up for me, and I think I did a pretty good job in at least some of those, especially during the earlier stages where things haven't derailed so much yet. And I think I had some interesting results in the mind game. Still, the company I worked for closed down, and I didn't get another job for the next few months. For the first time since more than half a year, I went on a party and took speed again. And I'm ashamed to say that unfortunately such a mistake has happened the day after that. So it was, I basically partied until noon. And the day after that, one such mistake has happened. What has happened is that I publicly have indicated something about this, which I shouldn't have. but it was neither my intention to brag, nor to harm, nor to betray. So quite the contrary, because previously I was even encouraged by them in that, though for reasons which I didn't understand back then. Or not in that specifically, but in let's say activities close to such, or similar to that. And personally, I wasn't even aware for a month afterwards that it was a mistake. Personally, I had more than a few reasons to do so. There was an incident which indicated that the issue of global warming was more serious than we had previously thought. There was an incident, or there seemed to have been evidence for the existence of some psychological phenomena which I thought must be of value when shared with the world. And there even seemed to have been evidence for the existence of God, though I don't necessarily believe in such reasons anymore, in such evidence anymore, for obvious reasons, as you may say, but also for reasons not so obvious to you yet. And there was an incident which made me believe that it is my duty to tell the story, and lastly, I was also made to believe that if I were to do so, then the consequence would simply be that they'd leave me. But that isn't what happened. As a consequence, I was trapped into another side of this structure where, under definitely false pretenses of work ethic, team spirit, and the demand for success, they'd been attempting to brainwash me, possibly in the most extreme manner imaginable. And people don't seem to understand the magnitude of the abuse, so I'd like to enumerate the methods. Non-stop, all day long, overloading through emotional blackmailing, gaslighting, and deceit. Feral and psychopathic treatment. Double binds, setups for failure, putting me into multi-level no-win situations. Food and sleep deprivations, economic abuse, social and physical isolation, keeping me on the edge of suicide, using despair to break me and hope to lure me back in. Suppression of thoughts, emotions, and fantasies, trying to prevent me from abstract and critical thinking. Basically violating me in almost every way that you can possibly imagine. Trying to kill my creative and imaginative abilities. Minimizing, denying, blaming, basically exploiting every abusive trick that you can find in the book, plus an endless number of their original tactics. At the start of this phase, they eliminated part of my emotions through binaural beats. And unaware of what I was getting myself into, it also damaged part of my hearing, and I couldn't hear bass as well anymore, which for a musical enthusiast such as myself was extremely traumatizing. For several other tactics, which may be too brutal or unethical for you to believe, they tried to make the start as traumatizing as possible and prolong that as much as they could. The paradoxical treatment induced a heavy cognitive dissonance, and it also seems likely, or to me it is obvious, that they also deliberately treated me in a manner which is likely to create psychological fragmentations or close to such, for reasons such as memory erasure and so on and so forth. If I were to resist, I'd been getting threatened with the following methods of torture, again, though it may sound too brutal for you to believe. It is true. Waterboarding, electroshocks, hand sawing, chainsawing, drilling, grinding, skinning, hammering, vivisections, putting me into vacuum bags, bitten by rats, frying, rape, burying me alive, and more. Or just sheer the reduction of my lifetime. Or the supposed reduction of my lifetime. This side of the game wasn't completely without the chance of transcending it, but having no one to talk about it, along with the confusions and so on and so forth. It proved extremely difficult to the point of, in my estimation, impossibility. It was also their demand that I always act as fast as possible, which I only adhere to in specific situations for several reasons. Their negotiations were extremely exhausting and unfair, and also partly used as a tool for brainwashing. For several reasons, I have come to resist their coercions many times, mainly in my eyes because it was impossible to do otherwise, basically, because their tyranny has been way more excessive than it was possible for me to biologically or psychologically adhere to. But for conscious reasons, simply because often I was forced to make my life worse, or not to improve it, or to treat others badly, simply to act in ways which I found wrong, or out of sheer confusion or denial. Since a few months, so since I have since I've started to basically commit myself to telling the truth, they are threatening me to each day to waterboard or otherwise torture my mother for activities necessary and unnecessary to live alike. Since I find it so extremely unethical in my senses that I can't let them get away with it, and since the alternative would be for me to still get brainwashed, continue to live a lie, basically walk myself to my torture chamber, walk myself to my death, help them in covering it all up, including damage which they may already intend to do to family members and friends, and let this dystopia, in my eyes, continue to unfold, when there was something which I could have done about it. I have committed myself to tell the truth. I don't want to participate in a society where everyone is living a lie. It seems wrong to me. It looks wrong to me. So, as I said before, that the experience that I've had at the earlier stages of the structure was a good one. Okay. But the people who are participating in this, I'm not even sure if they know it, how an extremely abusive and torturous role they play. And I think if a centralized government exploits the monopoly it has on these technologies to indoctrinate its participants and use them to act in such a manner, then things are definitely going in the wrong direction. I'm no blank slate. I've had my fair share of sins in the past. But having experienced brainwashing, I think that it's the worst that human beings are capable of next to torture. It's not just abrasive and full of deceit, but it's complex psychological abuse and torture under the pretense of alliance or the aim for good. It's a culmination of lies. Seeing yourself slowly getting turned into someone who neither you nor the people who are close to you cannot identify with, it goes something like this. You will not be there anymore. It's the complete violation of one's soul. You may wonder why it's even possible for me to speak up like this, I thought of it to be impossible half a year ago. Of course, they have threatened me with death several times for speaking up, but so far it hasn't actually happened. So I learned that these tactics were primarily deployed to create learned helplessness, and that they may lack plausible deniability in all of this. My hope is that they admit to their commitment of war crimes and violation of human rights, so that these things don't happen anymore, and that they admit to the existence and use of their technologies, which are directed energy weapons, synthetic telepathy, mind-reading technologies, what you may otherwise know as brain-to-computer interfaces, though not in the manner which you believe they may exist in the future. They exist already. and voice of God weapons, um, so that these things can be implemented in a manner which actually preserves privacy and individual sovereignty. Um, Unfortunately, this is not all I have to say, and I have to say there's more that I have to say, even though I don't want to. Throughout all this time, the Peterson family has been trying to help me through the use of coded messages on their social media accounts. Um, as I understand the situation, they are now threatening to kill Jordan for being unwilling to lie when confronted with the situation, which seems an inevitability, considering what I had indicated before, in the earlier stages of this operation, let's say. By me putting this video out there, I am putting their lives at risk, possibly even the lives of their acquaintances. But I also believe that I can simultaneously protect them in this manner. Because of this, the whole situation has been more public than it otherwise may have been. As indicated in the following video, which the Russian government has released about a few months ago. As mentioned in this video, or what seems to be an announcement regarding the COVID-19 situation on the surface is a level deeper, actually a coded message where they're blackmailing the American IC, offering them to silence me instead. They have also threatened me with torturing my mom and killing my friends by now, though especially the latter may not seem as obvious to you. If you don't know how coded messages work, I have some circumstantial evidence in relationship to this. If you know how coded messages work, then you probably already know that I'm telling the truth. Yeah, I plan to produce, if it should be necessary, I am going to produce several more videos on this issue and also give my thoughts on topics which may be related to it. If you're able to help, or if you have some further questions or inquiries, please contact me.